Yesterday I uploaded a video about using the generic flower foot attachment on the brother, and I had also done a video the day before on using it on a straight stitch 1591 and a model 237 zigzag machine. And today I'm kind of showing another option. This is a Singer Model 20, and I'll give you a better view of it in a minute. This is the one that I have that is in a blue hard case, and it has a table area. And I got this out last night I'm going to do a project. One of my rabbits needs some clothes, and I was going to do a project with this, and in the meantime, some of you may remember I have a leg injury, and it turns out that the injury to my leg might actually be because I, for a year or more, have been treadling and only using my right leg. And I think what's happened is, from what the doctors can tell, my right calf is like torn or something. So treadling is kind of out of the question for a little while, and I found that using the foot pedals on the different electric machines was aggravating it. So it's a matter of my ankle, my lower leg, and because it's painful, it will, and I don't know how long it's going to take for it to get better. It kind of helps me with a decision as to which machine to use. I'll be using a hand crank of some kind. I have a Spartan and a 99 that I can convert to hand crank. I have a 1588 that I can use as a hand crank, or I have my Model 20s. Now, all of that came up when I was in the middle of doing this project, which is going to be a little jacket for the rabbit. And this is similar to the Nellie B Weave It Square sweater that I did for Bitty Baby and American Girl and Batat dolls. I'm using 6.5-inch squares of fabric, and I have a blue rabbit that is actually made out of one of my old work shirts. And I wanted, you know those wonderful Levi denim work shirts? That's what she's made out of. And she's the only rabbit that has never had any clothes. So I'm going to make her a jacket, and the fabric I picked out is black. And I'm going to make her a pair of pants, and that fabric is flowered. So in the meantime, when I was doing flower shapes with the flower foot, I came up with a little design here that I'm going to put on the front of the jacket for her, but I'm doing it with a Model 20, and that's the point of the video. A Model 20 can be an alternative to using a big machine and a flower foot, because what I'm doing is I'm sewing on the back of the fabric, and what is going to show up on the other side on the front of the fabric is a very nice little chain stitch, and it really makes a decorative effect without having a flower foot or a big machine or anything. Now, there are a few little rules about the Model 20 because it's a chain stitch and the way that you need to end a seam. But you can see that you can draw a design. My design is on the back here, and I'll explain it in a minute. And you sew on the back of the fabric, like I am, and your design appears on the front. Now, the one drawback is that when you end each little row, you usually have to pull the locking thread, the last thread of the row, to the back of the fabric. But you can see this is actually a dandelion. And you know, I'm kind of I'm an artist, and I get into abstracts and stuff like that and simplicity. And at one point, my son had given me roses, and I did a chain stitch picture of roses. So this is a dandelion for a couple of reasons. Rabbits eat dandelions, and this is for a rabbit. And I found just by putting a couple of simple lines on here, the L is my initials because it's my design. If you have a young person or a young at heart person and you want to come up with a flower design, do your own flower and then just put a couple of lines that indicate a vase. And I put kind of a line across just for some visual interest. And then you can put parentheses. All of my artwork is signed with a copyright sign and then my initials. So instead of a copyright in the middle, I just put the L. And these, when you don't have a copyright symbol on your keyboard, you have to use parentheses. So this is my design. Now if your name is Abigail, you can put an A here and come up with your own design that's Abigail's design. But anyway, so this is a way to take the idea of that flower foot and use a very simple chain stitch machine to get the same effect. So you can see that the rows that I've done so far have threads, and they're actually the locking threads for the row. And I will take a hand needle and just pull those to the back. But it's very easy to do, especially when you keep your design that basic, where it's just a suggestion of everything and not, you know, trying to actually paint a dandelion with thread. So when you start a row, what you're supposed to do is hold the thread forward for 2 or 3 stitches and then pull it toward the back. And when you get to the end of your stitching, you keep the needle in the up position. You pull out some extra thread from the top. Use a seam ripper or something similar. And I'll show you this in another view, but you pull the loop to the right of the needle, you pull it to the right. So you're actually pulling some extra thread from the top of the machine, and your needle thread gets longer. You cut that in half, and it leaves a tail at the end of the row. And when you pull it out to the back, what the machine will do is force that tail to go into the last loop stitch and lock the stitch, which is actually right here. When I just pulled the fabric out, this thread right here came to the front of the fabric and it locks the last stitch. So starting the row like that and ending it like that are what's important with any chain stitch machine. And then you should end up with tails on the front of your work, or you know, the chain stitch side of your work. And then you would have to take a hand needle and pull that to the opposite side if that's what you're using as the right side of the fabric. If you're not sewing on the back and you're just sewing with a chain stitch machine, you just have to start each seam or row of sewing with this same method, where you hold the thread forward. You hold the thread forward for the first couple of stitches, pull the thread to the back, and at the end of the row or the end of the stitching, pull that extra thread from the top with the needle up, pull a loop to the right and cut it in half, and then pull the piece out toward the back. And the machine is supposed to do this. Force the tail through the last loop. Now sometimes you will end up with short tails like that, and you can either pull out a couple of stitches to get a long enough tail to thread a needle. That's usually what I do. So that's the way to start and end a row. And what I'm doing with that long row is I have to add, I'm going to be cutting this fabric in half. And what I'm doing is putting like a decorative edge down each side of the half before I actually cut the fabric. Now, in a sense, this would be like stay stitching with a, a larger machine. Now this is a little bit different from the Nellie B weaving loom squares, because with those we could just make sure that all the yarn was stitched in place, and then simply use the edges as fringe. And I can't really do that with this. And we'll be using like a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I think. I'm kind of working this through as we do it, but so I'll be cutting down the center, and as you can see I left enough space where I can probably turn under a 1/4 inch on each side after I cut the center. So that will be 2 pieces of a front cardigan style jacket. It's just like the weaving loom pattern. This is all the threads pulled to the back. And I had marked on the I needed to sew on the outer edge of these marks. Now what I'll do is probably put another line on the front equally between those two marks, these two lines, so that when I cut it, I have equal fabric on each piece. But for now, that is the first step, is to, you would need 4 squares that are each 6.5 inches square. And the first step would be to take 1 square and do a design of some kind on it, either in chain stitch, or if you wanted to use a lock stitch machine and the flower foot. So you want to put your design on 1 square. And when you're designing it, you have to design it in 2 halves, because this 1 square that is designed will be cut in half this way, and like I said, will become 2 pieces of the front. But you need to be able to cut it in half, so when you design it, you want, a design on each half of the fabric on 1 square. Okay, so here we are at the ironing board, and we have our 4 squares, one of which is the front and cut in half. And what I'm about to do is press a 1/4 inch under on the front center on each of these pieces, so that when I have that pressed under, I'll then be stitching down in black thread to finish off the front. Now, one note about doll clothes that's different from people clothes is that a lot of times you don't do finishing steps that you might do on an adult item. Like, I'm just going to turn this under a 1/4 inch, press it, and stitch it. On an adult item, you might fold it under twice to make sure it never frays or comes out. You might do a different type of seam. You might do more stay stitching. There are other things that you could do if you were making it for an adult. Now, I used a regular chalkboard chalk to draw that design and before I stitched it. But also, if it's easier, if you're new to sewing, you can mark the other 3 squares as well. You can make one the back, one the left sleeve, and one the right sleeve. And you can assume that the chalk mark is on the wrong side of the fabric. Just like a commercial pattern, really. You would make any markings on the back unless you knew they were going to wash out. So what we're going to be doing is turning under the center areas and stitching them, turning under the same amount one edge of the bottom, the back of the bottom of the back, and one edge each on each of the sleeves. And what I'm doing is finishing the bottom edges, the bottom of the back and the cuffs before I stitch it together. Sometimes the pattern will have you put the whole thing together and then you have to turn under the entire garment and stitch it. And that will give you a more circular look to the finished item, but it's also, if you don't have a free arm machine, it's sometimes difficult. You're sewing within a tube, and it's sometimes easier to finish them off while you have them flat. Now, you would need to do that to the bottom of the back and one edge on each of the sleeves in order to have the cuff done, and you would also need to do it to the bottom of the front. But before you do the bottom of the front, you need to turn under the center edges and stitch those. So pretend that's already pressed. I would then turn the bottom up and stitch that. And then use that as a guide mark to match your back piece so that you're lining everything up to be the same length. So that is the step we're at. Pressing under the edges I just mentioned, and then just stitching the areas that I just talked about. And by the way, this is for a bunny, but I have to show you my cow. I made this cow for my grandmother. My grandmother had a penchant for stuffed dolls, and she had beautiful velvet living room furniture and had all these dolls all over the furniture. And anyway, this was a cow I made for her one year, and my family gave it back to me. This is, I believe, it's another McCall's pattern, and it's quite tall. And this was a wonderful dress to make because it's all gathered, but it's got an attached petticoat, bloomers, puffed sleeves. It was a wonderful project. And I mean, the cow has her own personality, because when you make something like this and you put that time and effort into it, it almost does become a member of the family. And that's how my grandmother looked at her dolls, was that they were all members of the family. And one of the projects I have to do with some of the dolls I have like this is this one I probably made 25 years ago. And like the bunnies, some of the elastic on the bloomers has given out, so I have to redo the elastic on some of these. But so this what we're doing today for the bunny is really a simple beginning project, but it'll be a cute little jacket for a rabbit. Now what I did with all the threads that are on the front part, I more or less put them in a neat pile and press them down. You can trim them, but I wouldn't trim them all the way tight to the stitch. I would leave at least 3/4 of an inch or a 1/2 inch on each one. The other thing that you can do if you don't want all those threads on the inside of this, you can take a piece of interfacing and slide it over the threads before you stitch the center area, and then trim it to the edge or trim it first, either way. And what that will do is just keep the threads contained on the front part. You don't have to stitch the open edges, which are the top and the side, but you could cut the interfacing so that when you turn up the bottom here, it's also contained, and that would keep the threads contained. So you can either trim them, just press them down into a pile, or put interfacing on the inside. Okay, so I have edged all the edges that needed to be edged, and the next step is to place the front to the back, right sides together, and you can see I used a scrap piece of interfacing, and then I had a little interfacing melt, but it'll be fine. You place the two front pieces to the back piece, all the right sides together, like that, and then you are going to stitch from the outside edge in 1.5 inches, and from the outside edge in 1.5 inches, and that is attaching the front to the back at the shoulders. When you get that done, you then turn the front edges down in a triangle, and you can judge, you know, how far down you want them, and then stitch across them to keep them down. Now, before you do that stitching at the top, you may want to put this on the rabbit or doll that you're making this for. Now, this size should fit, as long as you keep the seam allowances to 1/4 inch, it should fit a Bitty Baby, an American Girl 18-inch doll, some hand-knitted dolls, and this is a 19-inch rabbit. It's pattern 3760 by McCall's, and I think they call it a 20-inch rabbit this size, but they really come out for me at about 19 inches. Now, what I was going to do this in 2 steps, and I said to stitch the edge down here, but at the same time, we're going to do some stay stitching across the back neck. And so what you could do is start here and don't fold the neck under, but start there and go right across, lining that part up right there. This is just lightly pinned, that would be turned under, and go right around the neck to the other side. And what that'll do is hold the 2 front edges down, and also put some stay stitching around the neck at the back. And when we're done with that, the next step is to put the sleeves on. So there we are. Now, you can turn the back of the neck under if you want to before you do that. I am leaving it loose like that. What I'm going to give this particular jacket is kind of the whole ragdoll flair by just, even if it's just one edge that might fray or might show wear or whatever, but you can turn that under if you prefer. But what you want to do is, whether you turn it under or not, you go around the neck like I said, which I have just done, and this is obviously the right side up. And now we will take each sleeve and right sides together match the sleeve to the side. And what you have to do is leave the front pieces facing down straight, and this edge away from the item is the one that's finished, you know, with a 1/4 inch seam allowance at the end. And you want to center the sleeve between the two pieces. Now that's how it's going to end up, but to do this you really have to do it this way. So do one sleeve at a time, and you can picture, you know, it has to end up like this. So you have to have it centered like that with the wrong side up, and then pin it and stitch it along the edge, centering it on the length of the whole piece. And then do the same thing with the left sleeve. And this is what it looks like now with the sleeves on. And you know, it's funny because the yellow and the black, it looks a little plain until you see what I'm making her pants out of. So I think it'll be cute. They're going to be overalls. And I have a dress out of this fabric. But it'll be a cute outfit. So those are the pants. Now to finish this, all we have to do is have right sides together, and stitch each sleeve from the cuff into the arm, and then each side down to the bottom. You just stitch like that on each side, lining everything up, of course. So from the cuff to the armhole, from the armhole to the bottom, with right sides together. And then we will turn it right side out and put it on Blue the Bunny. Now on this one, this is a ribbon I've had on her neck, but what I might do for the jacket is attach a ribbon at each of the front edges here, like a yellow ribbon. You'll see I haven't trimmed the threads off yet because I want to go back and make sure that all the ending seam stitches are caught and secured. But I could put a yellow ribbon right here and you know, use that as a closure at the top. And like I said, once I get the pants made, the pants are from the pattern, the McCall's 3760, and they're going to be a pair of overalls. So she'll have overalls on, and I don't have to make her a shirt because she's made out of blue denim. So there will be a cute rabbit outfit for Blue. And what I might do is see how this fits the Bitty Baby dolls and an American Girl or Batat doll. It's a little bit too tight still on the Bitty Baby doll, so I'm going to leave it that this is for the 20-inch McCall's Rabbit on pattern 3760. It's the arms. The arms on the Bitty Baby are so chubby that this doesn't fit the arms the same way that it does on a rabbit. So I'll leave that this jacket is simply for the rabbit from that pattern. Now this is the Model 20 that I've been using in the case, and I want to show you a couple of things about this machine. This is, like I said, it has a table. They do have little old rubber feet at the bottom of the case, but if you find it shifts around at all, I have padded this clamp with a bunch of batting and fabric and stuff, and I have it loosely clamped to the table. The case itself is kind of on an angle up, so be careful how you clamp it, but you can hold it like that. The other thing I want to show you, the table lifts up like this, and I can't move it all the way with the clamp in the way, but the machine sits on a base in here, and I just wanted to note that this is what this roller sits in the middle of the V to hold the machine in place. And this one I have to adjust, and that's what I wanted to point out. This roller can be adjusted by loosening those screws. But I think this is the only case they came with where you get a small table area to work with. The other advantage to this one is that, for example, if I end up in a studio apartment, I could put this on a bed and sit on a bed and sew, because it has a base and it doesn't need to be clamped to a table. And these are from 1953 to 1955. And this is the pattern for the bunnies, that 3760, and those are only a couple of them there. I guess it is out of print. I did look for it this morning, and it's available, but it's out of print. Now, as far as the machines, if I don't convert any machines, I have basically my 1588 and the Model 20s for hand cranks. So I had opened my big mouth not too long ago and said, gee, what would it be like if everybody only used a Model 20? And in my sewing pile, I have to make a pair of denim jeans and 2 sweatshirts for the dog out of fleece. So I'm eyeing this Model 20 and wondering if I dare try to make jeans with it. I wouldn't do felled seams or flat felled seams or anything like that, but these are just going to be elastic waist jeans, so it would be a casing and the seams. The hem at the bottom, I'm sure, would be a problem because it's fairly heavy-duty denim. I never would have thought of doing jeans with a Model 20, and I may still not even try it. But those are my 2 sewing projects coming up, and if obviously I could do both of them on the 1588. But I had been thinking, what if everybody had a Model 20 and that's what they had for their sewing machine? So we'll see what happens. But there is a jacket for one of the McCall's bunnies. Now, you know, normally I would fit this on the Bitty Baby doll to start with and see what adjustments I would have to make to have the same jacket fit the Bitty Baby, the American Girl, the Batats. And I'm not doing that this time. You can, though. I'm a little bit cranky today because, not only because of my leg, but I've been making plans to be using, at the minimum, 2 of my antique machines. And now everything might have to change again, and I'll only have the 1588 and a Model 20, unless I convert others. So now I have to rethink everything. And, you know, last year at this time, and it's still there, there's always a real threat that I could become homeless. So, of course, the timing of using a Model 20 and the timing of my leg being injured, I wouldn't be able to take all of my dolls with me. I may end up taking just this blue rabbit with me. So for today, I'm going to leave the pattern at the jacket for the rabbit. I thought a 6.5-inch square would give more than enough clearance for the Bitty Baby arms. And it doesn't, but you could try a 7-inch square. With the Nellie B weaving squares and whip stitch those together, this same jacket or sweater has the most give and the most fabric room at 6-inch squares. At 6.5, we're using that up in the seam allowances, and so we're running into the same thing as the sewn version of the Nellie B woven squares, where the seam allowances are taking up the space that would be make it able to fit a Bitty Baby. So you could do 4 7-inch squares and give yourself another 1/2 inch, and that should fit a bitty baby with the same exact pattern that we just did. This would probably fit an American Girl doll, but I may be sewing for bunnies because they're squishable. If I have to pack them, I can. Right now I have 6 bunnies. All of them are from like 25 years ago, but they're all in good shape. And I can stuff them into a bag much easier than I can with the vinyl dolls, the hard vinyl dolls. Plus, I had all the Barbies out. I had all of them out. So it's not only my leg injury. I obviously have to go to a smaller apartment, so I have to change a few things. And there's nothing wrong with sewing for bunnies. This pattern that this jacket is not in this pattern set. The jacket is my idea, but the overalls I'm going to make for this bunny are in here, right there. And it's a very easy pattern to follow. If you want to make the overalls for a rabbit, I mean, you can make a rabbit and like 2 of the items in here, the shirt and the pants, and they're a wonderful toy for a child. They're a wonderful, I'm telling you, my grandmother had stuffed animals everywhere, but they were more dolls than animals. They were animals, but they were dolls. They had fancy clothes. The rabbits I had given her have pinafores and aprons and all kinds of stuff. So you can get just as fancy for a rabbit. They also have a follow-up pattern to this with a second pattern for just more clothes. So obviously, I gave Jonathan, my son, Fred, when he was like a year old. But I only made one outfit, and Fred wore the same outfit all the time. You could do something differently and make all different clothes for a rabbit, which is why they came out with the other pattern. But anyway, the Model 20 should be able to stitch anything for a rabbit. I just looked at the denim I have for jeans, and it's overall denim. There's no way. There's no way I'll be able to use a Model 20. It's so thick, I don't even know. It's extremely heavyweight denim. So I'll be using the 1588 for those pants, and probably the Model 20 for any clothes for the bunnies. Now, some of the clothes for the bunnies I have to repair, and like I said, on the bloomers, the elastic has given out. All the other fabrics, everything held up. I'm amazed. It's been 25 years or more, and I'm amazed. So it'll be fun to make clothes for a rabbit, and if that's what I do with a Model 20, then I think that'll be fine. But this, using the chain stitch of a Model 20 is an alternative to the flower foot and a bigger machine.